Hello, viewers. Are you ready for a makgeolli brewing experiment? It's time to brew some delicious Korean rice wine. And today, let's try a new kind of first stage, SSALJUK. That's rice porridge made by cooking rice for a long time. And this is different from the regular juk that I make with rice flour. This is whole rice instead of rice flour. So a new method. But I don't have a specific recipe for this, so I'm going to experiment with two different methods. First of all, cooking it in the rice cooker on the porridge setting, that's A. And B, cooking it on the stove for 1 hour. So those are the two ways I'm going to try to make saljuk. And as always, the proportion of water affects the fermentation in a big way. So I'm going to measure the water carefully in both methods to keep things consistent and allow for a proper comparison. I don't want to, otherwise I'll just be, if there's any difference in the water content, that's going to make a big difference in the fermentation, and that's all I'm going to notice. So I need to keep the proportion of water the same for both of my attempts to make saljuk. If you like this video, please click that like button and subscribe. Please click the bell to be notified when I publish a new video on the subject of rustic Asian rice wine every week. And please share this video wherever it is appropriate. I really appreciate your help in spreading the word about rustic Asian rice wine. So let's brew. So I'm going to use this sushi rice to start with. That's just because I have it. It's not sweet rice, so mapsal. I'm going to use this non-sweet rice for the first stage. And here's jar A. I'm going to make this in the rice cooker. I'm going to cook 1 rice cup. That's 160 grams of rice. And add the water to the porridge 1 line. That happens to be 779 milliliters of water. But we'll measure this again after cooking. So I'm going to wash this gently, just once, and I'm going to replace the water and set the timer for the porridge setting. So it is going to soak for a while before it cooks. So there's soaking time built into this, and this rice cooker is probably 20 years old. It's neuro fuzzy, and it works. Okay, now it's cooked. Let's take a look. Okay, it doesn't exactly look like porridge. You can still see the grains, but there it is. It needs to cool. That's for jar A. Let's move on to jar B. Again, the same amount of rice, 1 rice cup, 160 grams. And I'm going to add a similar amount of water. I do have to account for evaporation, so I might add a little more as it's cooking. We'll see. And for this one, same thing. I'm going to let it soak for a while, and then cook it on the stove. Bring it up to a boil on medium heat while stirring constantly. I just don't want anything to get scorched on the bottom. No scorching allowed. And stir until it comes to a boil. That might take, I don't know, 10 or 15 minutes. Just be patient. So this is my stovetop saljuk right here. Slowly coming to a boil. Start to see some of the evaporation there. Then once it comes to a boil, I'm going to put it on the minimum temperature and stir it every 5 minutes. So that's boiling. Reduce the heat to minimum, and I'm going to keep on stirring this every 5 minutes until it has cooked for an hour total. And I'm going to show you what it looks like as it's every 5 minutes. There is a lot of evaporation, so I'm going to add a bit of water to replace some of the evaporation. Again, I can still see the grains of rice, but it is softening. This is much For example, this is much softer than it would be when I steam rice for godubab. Much softer and more water content. Okay, it's 1 hour finally. This looks, it's a pretty thick porridge. It's more like a dough, but it's fully cooked, that's for sure, and it's going to need to cool down, just like the rice cooker rice. So I'm going to weigh both pots of juk, subtracting the weight of each pot to compare the water content. The rice cooker rice is 832. The stovetop SSALJUK is 783 grams, but I still need to cool these down to room temperature, and I'll compare them again and adjust the water content appropriately. Okay, we want these to cool down to below 30 degrees Celsius. So that's enough time to mix up the nuruk mixture. So here's my supermarket nuruk, 90 grams, 200 milliliters of water, and half teaspoon of wine yeast. I like this kind. It works well for me. So I need to do this twice. And so it's the same nuruk mixture for both. Stir it occasionally and wait for the SSALJUK to cool down. And then after cooling, I weighed both A and B, taking into account the weight of each pot again. And it turned out that A is 19 grams lighter than B, so I'm going to add 19 milliliters of water to A to keep the water content equal. So notice the texture of the rice cooker SSALJUK. It's also pretty thick, but the grains of rice are a bit noticeable. It is cool enough now, so I am going to add the nuruk mixture and stir that with a wooden spoon. I could use my hand. Okay, and here's the extra bit of water to keep the water content equal for both of these. So I'm going to stir this with a wooden spoon for 5 minutes. That'll help incorporate air into this. Make sure it's completely uniform. This is the first stage, the mitsul, the first stage of this brew. So carefully pour it into the previously sanitized fermentation jar. And keep the lid loose and set it aside. Now let's do the same for B. And notice the texture of the stovetop SSALJUK. This is a lot smoother without the grains of rice being noticeably present. But it's still the same thickness. Not really a porridge, very much like a dough. Check the temperature again. Yeah, it's fine. And mix in the nuruk mixture here. And stir this one for 5 minutes. So the reason I'm trying 2 different methods for making SSALJUK is that I don't really know what the right method is. And I'll just observe this carefully and see if there's any difference in the brewing as we watch the fermentation progress and how it tastes in the end. Will there be any difference between these 2 methods of making SSALJUK? And pour that carefully into jar B. Lid loose again and into the cabinet to ferment. The next day, take a look. So there are you can see some bubbles, well, especially from above, you can see the bubbling on the top, especially for B. So it doesn't look exactly the same here. They're both very liquid. They're both completely softened now. Stir twice a day for the first 2 days. It's very easy to stir now. Then on day 2, slightly fewer bubbles, but still fermenting. Now let's prepare the second stage using sweet rice. And I've been using this Thai sweet rice. It's longer grain than the chop sal I normally use, but it works fine. So this is 1,680 grams of sweet rice or 840 grams per jar. And I wash that gently for about 10 minutes. So you do have several choices in the rice preparation method for the first stage. You could make bambak, you could make the regular juk with rice flour, and today we're making SSALJUK, and you could make a rice cake, a steamed rice cake, makgeolli. But it's interesting that these are all just cooked rice in one form or another, a certain proportion of water. They might seem like the same thing, but they do affect the beginning of fermentation, and they affect the result. They affect the taste in the end. So it is interesting how these small changes in rice preparation method affect the brew so much. So I am interested in finding out what the effect of SSALJUK is. But going to have to be patient. We're just washing rice for now. I do like showing all the rice washing and stirring. It's an important part of the process. You know, this is brewing, washing, stirring, waiting. That's what fermentation is about, and this is the process of brewing rice wine. So I do like showing it to you. Okay, we're going to soak this for at least 3 hours. Overnight is okay. And after it's soaked, I'm going to drain it in the colander here and rinse it. That's just to remove surface starch. Let it drain 30 minutes. I'm going to steam now. I'm going to steam in a cheesecloth. Dampen the cheesecloth first. So the cheesecloth is dampened. I got the steamer full of water and heated up, almost ready to go. The dampened cloth. Then put the rice in and fold over the cloth. Make sure it's even. And once the steam comes up again, start timing. I'm going to steam for 30 minutes. For the shorter grain chop sal, I steam for 40 minutes, but for this Thai sweet rice, it's a little thinner and it only needs 30 minutes. Once it's done, move it aside, carefully open up the cloth and move it over to the cooling rack. Spread this out to cool to room temperature. This is Godubop hard steamed rice, and then I'm just going to put half of it in each jar. And in order to do that, I'm using a scale, so I know the difference in weight between these two jars. They're almost the same weight, but they're just 10 grams different, and I use the scale to divide the rice evenly between the two jars. So in total, it should be 1 kilogram of rice in each jar. And in order to equalize the water content, I'm adding 240 milliliters of water to each jar. So it should be a 1-to-1 ratio of rice to water here. Mix by hand, separate all the grains. Do that for both jars. My hand is clean, of course, but yes, I do use my hand for the hand taste. This is brewing. Now, unfortunately, it's too hot to ferment this in the cabinet in the kitchen. So I'm going to take these down to the basement, and it's cooler down here. Should be better brewing temperature down here. I'll move it back up if it cools down a bit. Next day, the gotobop has absorbed the water. There's a bit of liquid at the bottom, still looking pretty solid. There's no need to stir anymore. Day 4, there's a distinct layer of liquid at the bottom. A lot of bubbles in the rice. That's why you need to allow headroom as well. Bubbles cause this to expand a bit. And we're just going to observe the fermentation day by day. This section of liquid at the bottom, rice should slowly fall from the top to the bottom, and that layer should slowly move up a bit. And yeah, so just keep observing it. These look similar. Yeah, they look like they're about the same schedule. And more rice is falling to the bottom. Still plenty of rice on top, though. And now it's becoming more uniform. That layer of liquid ends up disappearing because so much rice has fallen through it. Now the liquid layer has basically reached the top. It's day 18. I'm going to say this is bottling day. So let's do jar A. Boil my filter bag, my nylon filter bag. As always, if you're interested in any of the equipment I use, check the description. Listen carefully. There's nothing. It really is done fermenting. So it is good to bottle today. Good time to strain and bottle today. So I hope you enjoy seeing all the steps here, watching me strain and filter these. It was quite easy to squeeze this filter bag. And I end up with 247 grams of jjigae, the leftover. So that's good. So stir it up just to make sure it's uniform again, and put it in the bottles. So I'm just reusing plastic seltzer water bottles here. And it's time for the bonus bowl. That jjigae has plenty of flavor and alcohol in it, so I'm going to put it back in the filter bag after I weight it and add 150 milliliters of water and squish that down, get everything wet again, and re-squeeze this. Filter it a second time. The weight of the jjigae went down to 206 grams. So this is my bonus bowl. I don't want anything to go to waste. It's nice having this bonus bowl on the day of bottling. Now jar B. Pull the filter bag again. Stir this up. Pour the whole jar through the filter bag and squeeze. And again, not hard to squeeze. Jjigae was 226 grams. That's even better than jar A. Bottle this. And I'm getting the same amount. I'm getting a full 2 liters from this. And time for the bonus bowl. Second time filtering this, and it went down to jjigae went down to 196 grams. So here's the jjigae summary for all those who are interested. Extra extraction of 41 grams and 30 grams. So here's the result. So these two methods of making saljuk, in the first few days they did look a bit different, but they converged, and by the end, I think these, I couldn't tell these two methods apart in the jar. I'm going to enjoy these two bonus bowls, and then I'm going to do the real tasting right now. So it's been 3 days, and let's take a look at our bottles and compare them. And then we'll have a taste. So the A here is the Seljuk cooked in the rice cooker, and B was made with the Seljuk cooked for 1 hour on the stove. And you can see it's jar B that has settled better. There's more of a clear layer for the recipe that used the Seljuk cooked on the stove for 1 hour. So that's an interesting result. These are not the same. And the other bottle is consistent. So it's not just an accident of bottling. This is a consistent difference between these two recipes. So that's interesting. And I wonder if there is a taste difference between these two. So first, first let's taste the iyangju since we have the chance here. And I think neither of these are carbonated at all, so it should be easy to taste the iyangju today. So I'm just going to pour off a bit of A and a bit of B and then taste it. All right, so this is A and this is B. iyangju. Relatively clear considering it's only been 3 days. Both of these look quite clear. So that's a good characteristic for the Seljuk method. Okay, so aroma, definitely can smell the alcohol and maybe a bit of a rubbery aroma, or something deep and maybe a little smoky, or like tar. So that's an interesting smell. So it's a pretty rich smell, but let's give it a taste. Okay, there's more sweetness than I expected. It ends drier and a bit astringent. It seems like about the same level of sweetness. Pretty simple flavor. Yeah, not particularly fruity, some just some sweetness. Okay, so this is okay. The iyangju at this point is a bit plain, so I'm going to taste the wanju now. I'm going to mix up both of these bottles and taste again. So if I mix the iyangju and the takju on the bottom, it's very easy to do that at this point. And then here's wanju, the original alcohol, undiluted makgeolli. So I'll taste this next. And here's B. Okay, this is taking a bit more effort to mix up. Okay, again, we have A and B here. Still that rubbery smell. So that could be because I let this ferment for so long. That rubbery smell could be from dead yeast, and hopefully that dissipates over time as let it age in the fridge a bit. But let's see what it tastes like. Okay, so with a sediment, it is milkier. It's a bit more interesting. I'm surprised how sweet it is in the middle. The alcohol still tastes harsh. It's not mellow. It's just a bit of ricey and milky taste. So pretty normal, but yeah, just not surprisingly sweet and not fruity. Now B might be less harsh. So these have very similar tastes. The the big difference that was observable was the amount it settled. The SSALJUK method, at least in this experiment, seems to give a sweeter brew than expected, but something that's good with that's good as wanju. I'll try diluting this, see if I taste anything extra. It's still a fairly simple taste, although the wanju does taste better than the changju. At least the wanju tastes more substantial. I'm going to add some water to both of these, diluted approximately 1 to 1, just to give an idea of how it tastes diluted at makgeolli strength. And I'm diluting with carbonated water, so that will provide carbonation that's completely absent from the original brew. Since I let it ferment so long, there's absolutely no carbonation in the bottle. Okay, now with some carbonation, okay, as usual, that makes it a bit more refreshing. I'm not getting much more flavor out of it. Yeah, so this brew ended up quite simple, a bit harsh right now. It might mellow, and it might get rid of some of that rubbery aroma, which would be good. So that's what I hope happened. The interesting thing, it did turn out fairly sweet, but also not tart. So I'm a bit surprised about this batch. I think I would like this better if it had some tartness. So that's okay. So I tried a new method of preparing the first stage, the meat soul. I tried a new method of preparing that, and it does produce a different result. And I'm not sure which of the two ways I did it was more authentic, but cooking on the stove, well, maybe I'll guess that's more authentic. Cooking on the stove for an hour, that's really going to be ensure that the rice is cooked. You have more of a porridge state there. So maybe I'll assume the method B was more authentic. But in any case, it produces a relatively simple tasting brew. So that was an interesting experiment. I'm not sure I would do this every time, but it is a simplification of methods since you don't have to grind the rice. You just produce porridge, but you don't grind the rice. And grinding rice is actually quite difficult to do in the kitchen to grind wet rice. I don't have the right equipment to do that. I don't know. I don't know exactly what I would need to be able to do that in my kitchen. So I'm glad I didn't have to grind the rice this time, and but I'm a little disappointed that it produced a simple tasting brew. Well, I hope you found this interesting. I hope you're brewing. Let me know what you're brewing these days, and yeah, keep me up to date with your brewing projects. I always like hearing about those things, and let me know what you'd like to see. What you'd like me to see ferment in the future. I'm always interested in your ideas. Thank you for watching.